everybody. So I'm doing my PowerPoint on the standardized testing and just kind of an overview about it. So here's what you'll kind of find in my presentation. I did kind of an outline. The standardized testing, what it entails, is the state of Ohio practicing this testing, the history and current practice in Ohio, about the test, how it's administrated, how are the tests being done, what is the data used for, consists about the test, what is the role of standardized testing in early childhood education, and alternatives to testing. So standardized tests are a widely used type of assessment in the United States. They are scored consistently for each student who's being assessed, and these tests are being administered the exact same to ensure validity. So in order for these tests to be administered the exact same, you want to be able to show progress from the exact same test from beginning of the year to the end of the year between students. Okay, so I will go ahead and touch on the history of the standardized testing. I found a really great PDF from ohioeducation.gov that talks about this and kind of goes through different tests. But in the 1990s, Ohio proficiency tests came about. So Ohio proficiency tests were grade 9 and then later 12th grade, 4th grade and 6th grade, 5 tests of reading, writing, math, science, and it was citizenship. And 9th grade tests were conditioned for graduation, but they got moved to 10th grade with Ohio graduation tests, the OGTs, and they were not federally required at the time. So mid-1990s, growth in district assessments, there was more and more districts saw the need for interim assessments to just inform the district efforts that were happening. In 2005, Ohio Achievement Tests, the OAAs, which are now the Ohio Achievement Assessments, and the Ohio Graduation Tests, the OGTs, came about. This was the response to No Child Left Behind, because every child had a chance at education, a chance to pass these achievement tests in different grades, and to pass to graduate high school. So the OAAs, the Ohio Achievement Assessments, they're grades 3 through 8, reading and math, grades 4 writing, grades 5 and 8 science and social studies. Each of these measured how well students can demonstrate their knowledge from a particular academic subject or skill. And then the OGTs were grades 10. It's reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. And then also the kindergarten readiness assessment came. And then 2012, teacher evaluations happened, so student learning objectives. There's a significant shift in the testing system. Also, in 2015, Ohio State tests happened, grades 3 through 8, English, language arts, and math, grades 4 and 6, social studies, grades 5 and 7, science. There's also end of the course exams, so exams that you would need for these subjects, such as English 1, geometry, American history, biology, American government. And then they came out with a new kindergarten readiness assessment. The first one was on literacy. This one was much more with developmental. So test administration, each test has prescribed instruction on how it should be given to a group of students. It is important for the classroom teacher to read over these directions to the students. Teachers should practice reading over directions because you need to be clear as possible when it comes to the grade level to make sure that there are no questions about what the test is asking you to do. And then teachers must ensure to be objective during the test and make sure their body language is silent so that the kids don't have to try and guess answers from you. Okay, so the justification for standardized testing, this information also comes from the Ohio Department of Education, that PDF file. It was just such a great resource to be able to explain why we test and the different tests that we need to take and the data that comes with it, or examples that we have. So identifying and supporting quality education for all students based on Ohio's learning standards, ensuring all subgroups, English language learners, students with disabilities, etc., these kids are in inclusive classrooms. These students receive equitable education and consistent accountability for all schools. So in this PDF, I explained that they kind of break it down. So teacher tests. Why do we need to take tests that are in our classroom? And these are to understand the progress or the knowledge that the students are gaining through these lessons. And it's also to guide teaching. Do you need to spend a day on this lesson? Do you need to spend a week? How long do you think these kids will need to help understand the incomplete lesson? So examples would be like chapter tests and exit tickets. District testing. It's to understand how the district with the schools as a whole are performing. I have a few friends who are parents that are moving to these districts because they see these test scores, such as like the STAR reading test and the ACT and SAT. District tests for state requirements, so teacher evaluation, the OTEST, Ohio Teacher Evaluation System. It's supposed to be a very positive experience in order to see, are you meeting the requirements? Are you progressing? Are you getting your students on the right track with your lessons? And how can you improve? And there's also third grade guarantee and gifted student identification I will talk on the next slide about. So the examples are student learning objectives and the assessment of Terra Nova. State tests. Why do we take them? To understand if students are meeting their higher learning standards and guide state policies. And state tests for federal requirements. How is the nation doing as a whole? So the data from standardized testing. The data used from standardized testing is to ensure the quality of learning that is occurring in the early childhood classrooms. It is also looked at to ensure the students are getting the services needed to best help them. This can mean providing gifted instruction to those students who qualify, so the gifted identification. That needs to be pulling students who are ranking higher or testing higher than others that can be more challenged, and special education students who need more assistance in the classroom. The Ohio guarantee for third grade, it is to make sure that students by third grade are not falling off the bandwagon for reading, and that you're able to catch these students and kind of help them progress in reading at the third grade level. So teachers can use this data to see overall what needs to be emphasized in their curriculum. Along with positives of standardized testing and why we need to be able to take them, there are also negatives. So students all have different backgrounds and, more importantly, varying strengths that should be celebrated. Something to consider about this type of assessment is that non-content related gifts are not measured during this time. How is the student as themselves? Are they empathetic? Are they social? Are they friends? Are they friendly? Are they a good person? This is something that cannot be measured by pencil and paper. This assessment also causes teachers to focus more on the outcome of tests rather than allowing the organic flow to occur in the classroom. So this can also result in rushing through curriculum and causing gaps in the students' understandings. If you feel rushed as a teacher to make sure that you have this lesson plan done to move on to the next one, to prepare for these tests, there are going to be holes, and your students will be crushed in some aspects because they did not get a fully good grasp on the lesson that you were teaching. It also doesn't allow, just that organic learning to happen, such as if a student sees a spider, well, what are spiders and where do they come from, and just that branching off of questions. Are you allowing that time for them to discover also to happen? And the last disadvantage to standardized testing is the emotions surrounding the test. So testing causes so many emotions. Throughout the years, the conversation around test anxiety has grown exponentially. So much pressure are put on students to do well, which in turn causes students to get worked up, and it causes emotional and mental distress. If you are a student who might have test anxiety and you get a bad grade, but you do well in a class, it makes you feel like you have to be smarter. It makes you feel like everyone else is getting higher grades than you, like on such as like your ACT. Everybody else gets a higher grade, but you get a low grade. It makes you feel like you're dumb. Also, these tests are not measuring family life. The emotions that come with family, are they coming from a good home? What has happened? Is there grief surrounded by them? And also families that have, have more money to have access to private tutors. Students who have access to that, it's great, but also students that don't are going to get lower test scores. The idea of standardized testing seems beneficial in a perfect world. When walking into any classroom at the elementary level, it just becomes quite clear that the perfectionism is not tangible. Okay, so we discussed the negatives to standardized testing. So what are the alternatives? So during this last year, it's become apparent that standardized testing is not a crucial staple in students' educational year. Because of COVID, there weren't a lot of standardized testing that took place, just because students were not there, they were not academically there and progressing. So looking at alternative assessments can be beneficial, especially looking to the future as a nation with the aftermath of a pandemic. So where can we go ahead and take this pausing place that we have with the pandemic, and where can we take it to do something else other than standardized testing? So my first suggestion is the competency-based approach. So this is based on varied pacing, so the students are able to follow with their own individualized track in learning. The teacher would be helpful with the feedback, so we would actually be able to sit down and discuss their understanding rather than just being told they did not master something on assessment, and I wouldn't just push them along like a standardized test seems to do. We'd actually be able to sit and have a conversation of what they understand, what aspects they understand, and what aspects that they don't understand. Another alternative would be performance-based assessments. So this type of assessment looks at students' performance and further builds upon the understanding of the content at hand. So this assessment has a student actively involved in their learning. This helps nurture critical thinking and puts an emphasis on student-led learning. It is a great way to look at different content areas and tying them all together. So if they're actively involved, they are absorbing and understanding more. Examples of this would probably be like debates or plays. Have a discussion of how a debate is formed, and then being able to go and do it. An election, having a classroom election, going over vocabulary, writing kind of your campaign, and then tying it all together. And then finally, portfolio-based learning. This type of assessment looks at a student from the beginning of the year to the end. It is a completion of the student's work and shows their growth over time. Teachers keep track of the assessments through the year. In early education practices, this could have potential to be a great type of assessment. So in the beginning of the year, what are we learning? Is this something that we can work on and then show their progress? Just the same as the standardized testing does. It shows growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. All right, so we have reached the end of my PowerPoint presentation on standardized testing. I kind of saved this question for the end. Do I agree with standardized testing, yes or no? And I do not. The only thing I think that standardized testing does well would be showing the growth of the districts and just showing growth as a student. But there are different alternatives, as I've listed, that can show the same growth. I just think there's too much pressure placed on kids, especially in early education, so young, that they have to worry about these tests. And I think, like I said, there are just different ways to come about it. So I enjoyed making this PowerPoint. I learned a lot, and definitely that ohioeducation.gov PDF was tremendous in giving me the history and why we do it. All right, thanks so much.